Hello again. 15 or 20 years ago, the word hate was rarely heard, except in neutral and innocuous contexts such as I hate corned beef, or perhaps I hate Sundays. Today, it is impossible to log onto the internet, switch on your television, or open a newspaper without coming across some mention of hate. It is the left which has been determined to bring the word so readily into political and now social discourse. Hate has replaced milder terms such as dislike or slightly irritated by or I haven't any time for, and so on. These days, anybody who is not wholeheartedly enthusiastic about some sexual proclivity, group of people, or religion will be accused of hatred. Not too keen on seeing men dressing up as women? Gosh, you must hate trans people. Dubious about the benefits of Islam? Wow, you are Islamophobic and hate Muslims. Prefer to live next door to an English family? What's wrong with you? Do you hate foreigners? And so it goes on. I will observe that one never actually hears people saying, I hate homosexuals or I hate Muslims. This is an idea created by the left to smear those who adhere to different values from their own. I was prompted to think along these lines when I visited the Bluebell Woods in Wanstead Park yesterday. Wanstead Park is a lovely area of woodland which once formed the grounds of a grand house which rivalled Versailles for splendour in its day, in the 17th and 18th centuries. In the chalet wood there is a breathtakingly lovely display of bluebells. It is unrivalled in London. Two things happened while I was there admiring the flowers. The first was that a bunch of parakeets started making a racket. You know the rose-ringed parakeets which one sees all over London these days? Now, I'm actually very fond of these birds, but while gazing in rapt adoration at this quintessentially English scene of the carpets of bluebells beneath the trees, I could have wished to hear woodpeckers or blackbirds or thrushes, or any of the English birds with which I associate this time of year. You know the kind of thing I mean, Browning's Home Thoughts from Abroad. Oh, to be in England now that April's there. That ring any bells with anybody? While the chaffinch sings on the orchard bough in England now. This does not, of course, mean that I hate parakeets. I don't. But at that moment, and in that place, at this time of year, the screaming of parakeets was jarring and displeasing to my ear, and I felt momentarily annoyed to hear them. Of course, at other times I'm enchanted to see their beautiful colours, and I will stand and watch them. But just then they seemed to me to be out of place somehow in that Bluebell Wood. A moment or two later, as if by appointment, two women with young children turned up, chattering away in Romanian. One of the children was pointing at the flowers, and so her mother stepped over the tree trunks, which are laid there to stop people treading on the bluebells, and picked a bunch of them for her daughter. I need hardly say that several English people nearby drew in their breaths sharply and shook their heads in disapproval, which is about as far as we go in this country, really, to indicate strong disapproval. I'm bound to say that my personal feeling was one of slight annoyance, similar really to the way I had felt when the parakeets started up. It was a note out of tune with what was otherwise a wonderfully tranquil English scene. Does this mean that I hate Romanians? Of course not. Does it mean that I hate foreigners in general? No, that would be absurd. It was just irritating to witness people who did not fit in with the general ambiance and had no idea of the conventions and unspoken agreements which we in England have of the correct way to behave. That was all. Nor does it mean, of course, that I think that all Romanians are vandals or barbarians who charge around damaging woodlands at will. Neither does it mean that I have never seen English people conduct themselves in ways which leave a little to be desired. It simply means that yesterday afternoon I would rather have heard only English birds and been in the company of English people who followed the same code which I follow when admiring woodland flowers. Which brings me back naturally to the subject of hate in the form of hate crimes, hate speech, hate incidents, and all the rest of it. I do not believe for a moment that this country of ours is full of hatred for anything or anyone. I think we're being urged to think in those terms. You might almost say that hatred is being normalized. If anybody tuts at the sight of two men kissing, it doesn't mean that they hate those two men. It probably just means that they don't personally care for the sight of men showing overt and obvious affection for each other in public, and would rather that they did it elsewhere. For my own part, I have grave reservations about the wisdom of using surgery to treat what is essentially the psychological condition of gender dysphoria. But that certainly doesn't mean that I hate transsexuals. And so it goes on. I'm guessing that many viewers will be able to think of times that they too were less keen on something and were aware that this lack of joy is swiftly interpreted as hate in some quarters. As I pointed out in the video a few days ago, the actual concept of stirring up hatred was introduced by the wording of the 1965 Race Relations Act. But no ordinary person ever thought or spoke in those terms, or when that act was passed, people didn't start talking about hate speech or stirring up hatred. It was simply a legal expression. These days, it's impossible to go for a whole day without coming across the word hate somewhere. This is entirely the work of left-wing political types.